There's something humming quietly inside your home right now, spinning, draining, vibrating, every day, every week, without you giving it a second thought. It's not your phone. It's not your television. It's your washing machine. And what if I told you that this single, often overlooked object might be the exact reason your financial life feels stuck? Your motivation comes and goes in waves, or opportunities seem to slip right through your fingers. In the language of Feng Shui, water is never just water. It is wealth. It is movement. It is life energy that either flows in and feeds your future or drains out and takes with it your clarity, drive, and financial stability. Every time your washing machine swirls water through its drum, it sends a ripple across your energetic field, either reinforcing the flow of abundance or quietly dismantling it, not symbolically, structurally. Today on New Day Mindfulness, we're diving deep, not into mysticism or abstract theory, but into the real, grounded, centuries-tested principles of Feng Shui that show us exactly why certain placements of your washing machine support wealth, and why others all but guarantee stagnation, waste, and emotional fatigue. You might be surprised to discover that this isn't about replacing appliances or buying something new. Sometimes all it takes is shifting a single object a few feet in a different direction to alter the energetic message your home is broadcasting to your subconscious and to the universe. We'll break down the best directions based on classical energy models, show you which locations are energetically corrosive, and share one remarkable example of how someone transformed their relationship with money, not by working more hours, but by simply realigning their home with awareness. This isn't about superstition. This is about energy, how it enters, how it moves, and most importantly, where it gets stuck. Before we dive deeper, I'd love your support on this journey. A single like, a quick share, or a subscription helps this channel reach more people who might also be unknowingly inviting financial instability into their homes through small missteps like this. When we reach 2,000 followers, it allows me to share more content, more guidance, and more clarity with you, without clutter, without noise, and without fluff. So thank you in advance for helping this community grow. Stay with me, because in just a few minutes, you may start to look at your home and your washing machine in a very different way. Not as furniture, but as a mirror, a messenger, and a choice. Why the washing machine matters in Feng Shui. In classical Feng Shui, water is more than just a physical element. It is the lifeblood of prosperity. It represents not only the liquidity of money, but also the emotional currents that run through our lives. Water governs how wealth is acquired, how it moves, and, critically, how it is either retained or lost. While many homeowners associate water only with the kitchen or bathroom, there's one modern object that moves large volumes of water consistently, yet rarely gets attention from an energy perspective: the washing machine. At first glance, it appears to be a simple appliance designed for a routine task. But when viewed through the lens of energy architecture, the washing machine is far from passive. It spins rapidly, consumes significant amounts of water, vibrates during cycles, and often operates in confined or neglected areas of the home. All of these qualities make it a potent energy activator, not unlike a ceiling fan or an air conditioning unit, but with even more symbolic power because it moves water, the very element tied to wealth. The placement of this machine is therefore not trivial. Depending on where it's positioned in the home, it can either enhance the energetic flow of abundance or silently create a persistent leak in your financial field. Feng Shui doesn't just deal with what's visible, it deals with what's felt. And just like a plumbing leak behind a wall can cause hidden damage to a house's structure over time, an energetically misplaced washing machine can symbolically leak wealth, motivation, and clarity from your life. These effects often go unnoticed at first. People feel tired, their finances stagnate, Emotions feel heavier than they should, and often no one suspects the washing machine. Think about it this way. Any appliance that generates movement is considered an energy amplifier in Feng Shui. Movement equals activation. And activation without intention can either help you or hinder you. Fans can stir chai, vacuums can scatter it, and washing machines, which combine water with circular kinetic energy, can radically alter the wealth dynamics of your home. That's why we don't treat the washing machine as a neutral object. Where it's placed in your floor plan determines whether it becomes a channel for purification, renewal, and prosperity, or a subtle, consistent source of energetic turbulence that wears down the vitality of your living space. Feng Shui at its core is about flow, of energy, of opportunity, of life. And the washing machine, because of its function and nature, plays a more powerful role in that flow than most people realize. When placed correctly, it mirrors the cycle of effort and reward, cleansing and replenishment. When placed poorly, it mimics patterns of energetic waste, financial instability, and emotional fatigue. So as we begin to explore optimal locations and alignments in the sections that follow, remember this: in the world of energy design, the washing machine isn't just another appliance. It's a message, and every spin it makes is a sentence in the story your home is telling about your relationship with wealth. Best places to place your washing machine: East, direction of growth and family health. In the practice of classical Feng Shui, the east direction of any home or property carries profound energetic significance. It is not simply a compass bearing. It represents renewal, personal growth, and the energetic potential for healing and upward momentum. Governed by the wood element, which symbolizes vitality, expansion, and consistent forward movement, the east sector becomes an ideal candidate for housing any object or activity that supports life enhancement, especially when that object carries a water element component. The washing machine in this context fits remarkably well, not just because it uses water, but because its very purpose is to cleanse, refresh, and prepare something old to be used again. That is the spiritual language of wood energy. Wood doesn't just grow, it regenerates. It leans toward the sun, reaches for possibility, and recovers from damage if supported by the right environment. Placing your washing machine in the east sector then is not just a practical choice, it's a symbolic alignment between the energetic action of the appliance and the elemental essence of the space. When water nourishes wood in the 5-element cycle, it fuels its natural function: growth, adaptability, and strength. This means every time your washer runs, it's not just spinning fabric, it's supporting the flow of fresh energy through the foundation of your family's future. Energetically, this placement can help move you out of financial stagnation or emotional fatigue, especially for individuals recovering from burnout, family conflict, career setbacks, or personal loss. Activating the east with the right kind of movement restores confidence and grounds your intentions in a place where the chi of new beginnings can take root. It's not a coincidence that in traditional Chinese homes, the east-facing door or garden is the most vibrant and healthy area. The early sun enters from the east, and so do the first breaths of daily vitality. When your washing machine occupies this sector, you are integrating a symbol of daily cleansing into the zone of natural renewal, making it easier for you to move forward in life without dragging old, unprocessed energy behind you. However, as with all Feng Shui applications, balance is essential. Because the washing machine has fast, repetitive, and mechanical motion, it's important to temper that energy with stabilizing design elements. One of the most effective ways to do this is by incorporating grounding materials that speak to the earth element. Bamboo, for example, harmonizes with both water and wood. It's strong yet flexible, decorative yet organic. A bamboo plant or panel nearby can create visual balance and soften the machine's energetic push. Similarly, natural stones like river rock or slate tiles beneath or adjacent to the washer can help calm the high-frequency vibration emitted during its cycles. The idea is to maintain wood's natural growth without letting it become chaotic or overstimulated by uncontrolled movement. Even colors can assist in this process. Surrounding the machine with muted greens, browns, or soft creams can anchor the energy and prevent energetic overstimulation. This placement is particularly beneficial in households with young children, elderly family members, or anyone working through a recovery phase, whether physical, emotional, or financial. The East supports rebirth in all forms, and when the water-driven function of the washer activates within this field, it reinforces that purpose. It invites emotional resilience, a healthy flow of dialogue among household members, and a forward-looking mentality. Furthermore, the symbolic action of removing dirt and refreshing garments aligns beautifully with wood's seasonal metaphor. Spring, when life returns after a period of dormancy. Every laundry cycle becomes a quiet ritual of release and renewal. It is not just fabric that is being refreshed. It is your energy blueprint, your attitude toward change, your willingness to let go of past heaviness and make space for new vitality. In modern life, where washing machines are often crammed into corners for convenience, few people ever consider what their appliances are broadcasting into their living space. But when placed in the East, and with care and mindfulness toward its surroundings, the washing machine becomes more than a machine. It becomes a facilitator of harmony and new growth. That's the power of conscious placement, and that's why the East, when used wisely, can become one of the most beneficial zones for anchoring this often overlooked but high-impact object. Southeast, the wealth and abundance sector. In traditional Feng Shui theory, the southeast corner of the home has long been revered as the sector of wealth, abundance, and accumulated prosperity. This direction, governed by the wood element and often referred to as the money corner, represents more than just potential income. It symbolizes the ongoing relationship you have with assets, savings, and long-term growth. While many people associate wealth energy with the objects they place in this zone, such as a jade plant, a wealth vase, or a gold-framed mirror, few realize that appliances, especially those involving water and movement, can have a powerful effect on how energy is activated, cleansed, and circulated in this area. The washing machine, when intentionally placed in the southeast, can function not only as a utility item, but as an energetic tool for maintaining the motion of prosperity and removing stagnation from the household's financial flow. However, this placement is far from plug and play. It must be approached with precision, awareness, and an understanding of how energy behaves in enclosed environments. When used wisely, the symbolic action of the washing machine, drawing in used or dirty items, purifying them through the application of water in motion, and releasing them clean and refreshed, parallels the ideal pattern of financial energy. Money enters your life, it is used with purpose, it is cleansed of attachment or excess, and then it returns in new and invigorated forms. This constant loop of receive, transform, release is exactly the chi behavior that the southeast corner thrives on. The presence of a water-powered appliance, particularly one that is used routinely, can enhance this cycle by anchoring motion in a space that demands vibrancy. If the washing machine is aligned properly within this corner, meaning it is not too close to walls, not jammed into a dark or blocked area, and not surrounded by clutter or conflicting elements, then it can serve as a highly effective stabilizer for wealth chi. The key here is cleanliness and light. The southeast must be kept dry, bright, and aerated. Any moisture, mold, mildew, or shadow in this area can reverse the benefit of the machine's presence and instead signal rot, loss, or entrapment. In other words, the exact same object that can support prosperity when placed consciously can sabotage it when placed without awareness. It's important to recognize that this corner, while energetically strong, is also sensitive. It cannot carry too much weight from competing elements. A bathroom nearby, a sink drain, exposed plumbing, or constant dampness will drain the qi that the washing machine is trying to circulate. The result is a literal and symbolic outflow of wealth. You earn but cannot keep. You work but cannot accumulate. This is why the placement of the washing machine in this sector must be treated with care. If the southeast area of your home is already compromised due to a poor floor plan, architectural constraints, or nearby water disposing elements, it may be wiser to select another direction altogether. But if this area is open, quiet, sunlit, and grounded in the wood element, for instance, supported by green plants, wooden accents, or earth tone decor, then the washing machine can act as a circulatory enhancer for financial life. Aesthetically and energetically, adding a few elements to support the washing machine's function can help seal the positive flow. Placing a green leaf plant nearby but not on top of the machine, choosing a machine color in soft metallic or light neutrals to reflect rather than absorb qi, and ensuring that the surrounding area is never visually cluttered are essential to long-term success. Even the sound matters. A noisy, unstable washer that vibrates excessively will create agitation and energetic friction in this wealth zone, mirroring instability in your financial reality. A balanced, quiet spin aligns better with the type of calm, sustainable wealth energy most people aspire to build. Another subtle but powerful factor is intention. In Feng Shui, objects don't act alone. They respond to the energy field of the person using them. Each time you approach the washer, especially when it's placed in this wealth sector, consider pausing for just a moment. Take a breath. Focus on the idea that you are not just washing clothes, you are symbolically cleansing attachments, debts, and limiting beliefs tied to wealth. You are activating a rotation of clarity, usefulness, and flow. Over time, this subtle awareness forms an energetic habit, anchoring your wealth mindset into your physical environment in a way that is both invisible and profoundly effective. So while the southeast placement of a washing machine may seem unconventional to those used to thinking of laundry rooms as purely functional zones, Feng Shui practitioners know that wealth doesn't grow from clutter, darkness, or neglect. It grows from flow. It grows from harmony. And when you place something as powerful and active as a washing machine into the wealth corner with full awareness, supported by light, intention, and balanced design, you're not just washing clothes, you're nourishing your relationship with abundance itself. South. Visibility and recognition. In the classical Feng Shui compass, the south direction governs visibility, recognition, honor, and how you are perceived by the outside world. It is the zone most closely tied to your personal and professional reputation, how others view your talents, trust your leadership, and acknowledge your contribution. Energetically, the south is ruled by the fire element, and as most students of Feng Shui know, fire and water are traditionally seen as opposites. Fire rises, water sinks. Fire is expansive, passionate, and bright, while water is deep, flowing, and cool. For this reason, the thought of placing a washing machine, an object dominated by water energy, into the fire-oriented south might raise concern. However, in specific conditions and with intentional design, this placement can become unexpectedly powerful, especially for those seeking to reignite career energy, overcome cycles of financial invisibility, or step back into a position of public confidence after a period of personal setback. To understand how this apparent contradiction works, we need to shift perspective. While water and fire do indeed conflict in their raw forms, it's also true that balanced tension can create momentum. Think of steam. It forms when water meets fire in a contained environment, and its energy can power entire engines. The same principle applies here. A washing machine in the south sector, when placed with conscious alignment, does not extinguish fire energy. It accelerates transformation. This is especially true in homes where energy has grown stagnant, where personal motivation has cooled, or where professional opportunities feel blocked. In such cases, the introduction of dynamic water energy into the south acts like a push. It stirs the chi, it forces movement, and under the right conditions, it becomes a catalyst for visibility and renewed public momentum. But for this placement to work, the space must be supported by fire-friendly design cues. First and foremost, the south must be bright. Natural sunlight is ideal, but if that's not possible, mirrors or warm-tone lighting can serve as functional substitutes. The goal is to create a space that feels alive, activated, and directional, meaning that energy moves outward from it rather than collapsing inward. If the space is shadowy, cluttered, or boxed in, the water element from the washing machine will overwhelm the fire field, leading to energetic dampness, manifesting as apathy, loss of confidence, or career stagnation. But when this space is filled with warmth, color, and directional intention, the water from the washing machine behaves more like a current clearing away the ashes of past inertia. This placement becomes particularly valuable for those who feel invisible in their professional life, overlooked in meetings, uncredited for their efforts, or stuck in roles that fail to showcase their talent. In Feng Shui terms, the South governs fame not as vanity, but as acknowledgement. And if that sector is sleepy, dark, or underused, the outer world often reflects the same: a lack of notice, recognition, or reward. Installing a washing machine in this direction introduces movement, literal and symbolic. It creates a rhythmic pulse, a kind of chi heartbeat that encourages the space to open up. It draws attention back to the south and, by extension, back to you. Each cycle of the machine becomes more than a domestic task. It becomes a ritual of re-entry, a gentle signal to the universe that you are ready to be seen again. Still, the placement requires harmony. Surround the machine with materials and colors that support fire energy: wooden shelves, red or coral accents, triangular shapes. Even a single red cloth or framed image of the sun can energize the field. It's not about redecorating the whole room, it's about intentional enhancement. Let your choice of decorations subtly affirm the message: this space is active, I am visible, I am stepping forward. If your career has hit a plateau, if your business is stalling, or if you've felt withdrawn or undervalued, aligning your washing machine with the south and anchoring it with sunlight, clarity, and symbolic intention can create subtle but powerful shifts. The world reflects what your space broadcasts. When the south of your home is clean, bright, and activated, even with something as simple as a well-positioned washer, life begins to respond. People call you back. Opportunities reappear. And the silence that once surrounded your talents begins to break. This is the subtle art of Feng Shui, not superstition, but structure. Not magic, but message. And when water meets fire in the right space, the result is not conflict, it's ignition. Places to avoid if you value stability. When examining the energetic integrity of a home through the lens of classical Feng Shui, placement mistakes are rarely random. They are patterned, repeated, and often done unconsciously in the name of practicality. Nowhere is this more evident than in the locations where washing machines are placed without awareness of what that placement broadcasts into the space. While many homeowners choose laundry spots based on plumbing access, visual convenience, or spatial efficiency, Feng Shui demands a deeper consideration. How does the water-based, high-movement energy of a washing machine interact with the symbolic function and elemental constitution of the room it occupies? The consequences of overlooking this relationship can be subtle but far-reaching. Emotional exhaustion, money that disappears as quickly as it arrives, a persistent feeling of stagnation despite ongoing effort, and interpersonal friction that seems to arise without cause. These outcomes do not come from superstition. They come from disharmony and flow. Let's examine 4 key placements to avoid if you're seeking long-term financial stability, emotional clarity, and energetic resilience in your home. The first space to scrutinize is the bathroom. In Feng Shui, bathrooms are inherently draining environments. They represent outflow, elimination, release. With every flush, every shower, every act of cleansing, chi is moved down and out. While this is essential for physical hygiene, it creates a zone of energetic depletion. Water is constantly leaving. It is never being cultivated, gathered, or retained. Now introduce a washing machine into that space. You've added another dimension to the drain, a mechanical vortex that pulls, agitates, and disposes of water in cyclical bursts. The effect? Energetic overflow. What's meant to be a quiet discharge space becomes an overactive whirlpool of movement, leading to symbolic consequences like difficulty retaining money, a sense of always being tired or emotionally overextended, and cognitive fog. People living in such homes often describe feeling like their motivation is washed away by the end of the day, even when they have done nothing physically demanding. If this placement cannot be avoided due to architectural constraints, mitigation is possible. Install moisture-absorbing elements like Himalayan salt rocks, bamboo charcoal, or a ceramic bowl filled with dry rice in a nearby cabinet. Keep the bathroom door closed when not in use. Add an earth element feature, such as a stone mat, small ceramic pot, or beige rug, to help anchor the energetic movement. These interventions don't neutralize the conflict completely, but they slow the leak and stabilize the space to a more manageable degree. Next, consider the kitchen. This is one of the most vital zones in any home, not just because food is prepared there, but because in classical Feng Shui, the kitchen stove represents the financial engine of the household. It is where fire energy resides and where nourishment transforms raw materials into vitality. Placing a washing machine, a water-dominant object, into this fire-controlled space creates elemental conflict. Water quenches fire. It suppresses digestive energy, productivity, enthusiasm, and more literally, the internal heat needed for metabolic clarity. The symbolic result is a household where people work hard but feel constantly drained, where income arrives but is quickly spent or mismanaged, and where arguments around food, health, or money become frequent. In more subtle manifestations, residents may feel emotionally overheated, easily triggered, impatient, or perpetually overstimulated. To soften this water-fire collision, apply the 5-element cycle solution. Insert the wood element between the two. Wood is nourished by water and fuels fire, making it a natural harmonizer. A tall bamboo plant, a wooden lattice divider, or even green-toned kitchen towels or cabinet fronts can help buffer the energetic shock. Ideally, though, the washing machine should be placed elsewhere entirely, as even with harmonizing elements, the tension between water and fire never fully dissolves. It is only managed. Another commonly misjudged location is the balcony or any outdoor corridor. While this may appear practical in warm climates or small apartments, it is a decision fraught with energetic instability. In Feng Shui, balconies are considered spaces of qi dispersion. They are transitional zones, open to wind, rain, noise, and external elemental shifts. Placing a washing machine here exposes it to yang energies that are constantly in motion, making it difficult to hold or cultivate any stable flow. Financially, this reflects its unpredictability. 1 month of abundance followed by sudden scarcity, or a promising venture that collapses without warning. Additionally, the machine's physical wear accelerates due to environmental exposure, symbolizing money that works harder but lasts less. People who keep their washers on balconies often find themselves repeating patterns, earning, repairing, losing, starting over, with no sense of traction. If the balcony is your only option, you must reinforce its edges. Choose a spot that faces east if possible. This direction supports growth and new beginnings, which can offset the energetic scatter. Install wood or brick shelving to ground the machine's vibration. Use weatherproof panels to shield from wind and sun. Place a healthy plant in a ceramic container nearby to stabilize qi, and never leave laundry supplies in plain view, as clutter magnifies energy leak. Lastly, we come to the right side of the house, what ancient Feng Shui theory calls the white tiger position. In the celestial animal model, this quadrant is meant to be quiet, yin, and protective. It corresponds to defense, instinct, and emotional balance. It is where passive, receiving energy should settle to restore and recalibrate. When you place a noisy, mechanical, high-motion appliance like a washing machine in this zone, you create turbulence where stillness should reign. The outcome is often subtle but persistent. Emotional restlessness, tension among family members, the sleep disturbances, and sudden reactive behaviors that seem out of character. Financially, the effects show up as impulse spending, rushed decisions, and relationships strained over misunderstood conversations. The fix here is location awareness. If the washer must remain on the right side, counterbalance it by activating the left side, known as the green dragon position. This area thrives on upward, expansive chai, decorated with plants, warm lighting, or upright objects to reassert yang strength. You should also avoid running the washer at night when yin energy dominates, as this intensifies the disharmony and can lead to deeper emotional unrest. Choose morning or early afternoon hours instead, when qi is most balanced and recovery energies are not being disrupted. When we think about these placements collectively, what becomes clear is this: the washing machine is not just a mechanical tool, it is an energy conductor. And where it sits, how it behaves, and what surrounds it all become part of a message your home sends to your subconscious every day. These locations, bathrooms, kitchens, balconies, and right-side zones, are not inherently bad, but they are sensitive. They require intentionality, compensation, and awareness. If ignored, the result is not disaster, but dissonance. And dissonance, when repeated daily, becomes a pattern. The goal of Feng Shui is not perfection, it is harmony. And harmony begins when even our most ordinary tools are placed with extraordinary care. The right machine type and color matters. When evaluating the role of a washing machine through the lens of Feng Shui, it's not enough to consider only where the machine is placed. The type of machine and its color also matter significantly. Just as architecture and orientation shape the movement of qi throughout a home, so too does the design of individual appliances. Every object carries an energetic signature, and the way a washing machine functions, its movement style, loading direction, noise, weight distribution, and even the hue of its outer casing, all send messages into the environment that are either in alignment with stability and wealth or subtly in conflict with it. Let's begin with the front-loading machine, which is widely favored in modern homes for both aesthetic and space-saving reasons. But from a Feng Shui standpoint, it is also a more energetically balanced design. The circular horizontal spin of a front loader mimics the natural flow of chai, smooth, contained, rhythmic. This gentle spiraling motion symbolizes continuity and preservation, which makes it highly suitable for intentions related to wealth retention, emotional equilibrium, and long-term growth. In terms of energy expression, the front-loading machine is more yin in nature, less aggressive, more grounding, and better at integrating into an existing energy field without disturbing its core. This makes it an ideal choice for homes where the primary intention is to build security, protect savings, and reinforce inner balance. It is especially well suited to placement in the east, southeast, or south sectors of the home, where wood and fire energies are dominant. These directions benefit from the stabilizing, water-driven qualities of a front loader, allowing the washer to support qi instead of overwhelming it. When paired with intentional design choices like soft lighting, clean lines, and natural textures, the front loader can act as an amplifier for calm and resilience, reinforcing not only the home's energetic field, but the mental patterns of those who live in it. On the other hand, top-loading machines carry a very different energetic imprint. Because their primary motion is vertical and forceful, they tend to generate upward, disruptive energy, a sharp burst rather than a gentle whirl. This style of washing machine is more yang in expression, more suitable for large open spaces that can accommodate heightened movement without becoming overwhelmed. Top loaders, while often more affordable and accessible, emit a kind of energy that is better suited for environments where change, action, and drive are the primary focus, not quiet restoration or financial stabilization. In small apartments, crowded rooms, or emotionally sensitive spaces, the vertical activation of a top loader can feel jarring. Residents may not consciously register the disruption, but over time, subtle symptoms appear: restlessness, tension, inconsistent sleeping patterns, and even indecision around money-related matters. That doesn't mean top loaders are inherently negative. It simply means they need buffering. Integrating wood element materials like bamboo, pine, or light-colored wood shelving around the washer can help disperse its intensity and bridge its water nature with the surrounding environment. A bamboo rug beneath the machine, for instance, can both soften the vibration and symbolically root the machine's energy downward, preventing excessive energetic upward thrust that disrupts clarity and consistency in daily life. Beyond mechanics and emotion, the color of the washing machine is an equally crucial factor in determining its energetic impact. Color in Feng Shui is not just visual, it is vibrational. Each tone corresponds with an elemental frequency, influencing how energy is absorbed, reflected, or grounded in a space. Black and charcoal colored machines, for example, absorb chi rather than reflect it. While this can create a sleek, modern appearance, it also introduces density into the room. If placed in a wealth sector like the Southeast, or in emotionally sensitive areas such as bedrooms or family spaces, dark machines may pull energy inward, creating symbolic blockages that mirror hesitation in financial decisions or difficulty maintaining long-term momentum. These tones are only recommended in larger, well-lit spaces where yang energy can counterbalance the heaviness. If the room is tight, dark, or already contains heavy materials, a black washer compounds the stagnation. In contrast, white, silver, and light gray machines are considered highly auspicious for most households. These colors reflect light and energy, supporting mental clarity, focus, and productive action. A silver machine in the South not only complements the fire element by subtly amplifying brightness, but also adds a clean, intentional aesthetic that reinforces conscious action. In spaces where decision-making, communication, or planning take place, such as home offices or utility zones, light-colored machines are ideal because they promote clear thinking and help release mental clutter. Similarly, light tones are more visually calming and emotionally neutral, which makes them less likely to interfere with household dynamics or cause subconscious agitation. Earth tones, such as beige, tan, and warm sand, carry the energy of stability and nourishment. They ground and contain. When used correctly, they can make the washing machine feel less like a mechanical intruder and more like an integrated feature of the home's energetic design. However, in small or low-ceiling spaces, earth-tone machines may feel too heavy. Their grounding effect, while stabilizing, can become inertial if not balanced with movement, light, or upward expanding forms like vertical shelves or light wood accents. If the entire laundry area leans too heavily into earth without the uplifting influence of wood or the clarity of metal, the space becomes energetically sluggish. Money may sit still but not grow. Emotions may be steady but uninspired. In this case, color harmony becomes essential. Pairing earth tone appliances with fresh greenery or reflective surfaces can provide the necessary lift to avoid energetic stagnation. Choosing a washing machine, then, becomes more than a question of brand or budget. It is a decision that, whether realized or not, begins to shape the flow of energy in your home. Motion, direction, color, and material composition all contribute to how the appliance interacts with your environment. Whether you are seeking to retain wealth, increase visibility, stabilize emotions, or improve clarity, the right machine, placed in the right location, enhanced with the right design elements, can become an ally in that pursuit. Energy doesn't discriminate between sacred objects and functional ones. From the Buddhist Feng Shui perspective, everything in the home is a messenger. When your washing machine aligns with your goals, your intentions become easier to carry. When it conflicts with your environment, you may find yourself working twice as hard just to stay in place. By choosing the right machine and color and placing it with awareness, you invite alignment into your life, where even the act of doing laundry supports the flow of prosperity. Every corner of your home tells a story, not just with its furniture or colors, but with the way energy moves or fails to move through the space. In the teachings of Feng Shui, your home is not just a shelter, it is a living map of your inner world. Each object, each placement, each unconscious choice becomes a reflection of how you relate to money, to movement, to rest, to self-worth. The washing machine, seemingly one of the most mundane items in a household, is in fact a silent but potent energy conductor. It moves water, the element of wealth. It repeats cycles, the habits that shape your days. It operates in rhythm with your life, cleansing, spinning, draining, releasing. And where you place it, how it interacts with the elements around it, determines whether it reinforces abundance or disrupts it. This isn't about perfection. Feng Shui never demands that. It's not about trendy minimalism or picture-perfect interiors. It's about understanding flow of money, of thought, of intention, and recognizing when that flow is blocked. Most people don't realize how much of their fatigue, frustration, or financial inconsistency stems not from effort, but from environmental misalignment. When the layout of your home contradicts the rhythm of your goals, even the best intentions can struggle to gain traction. But when your space supports your direction, even subtly, everything starts to move more easily. It could be as simple as shifting your washing machine a few feet, changing its color to reflect rather than absorb energy, or surrounding it with symbols of clarity and growth. These aren't decorative upgrades. They're energetic declarations. They say, I am ready to align my actions with my vision. And in that clarity, wealth begins to settle, inspiration begins to return, and emotional weight begins to lift. So take a few minutes today, quietly without judgment, to walk through your home. Ask yourself where your energy feels light and where it feels heavy. Is your washing machine tucked into a corner out of convenience but fighting the very energy you're trying to call in? Then maybe now is the time to reconsider the message it's sending, not just to your house, but to your life. And if this video offered you insight, or if it reminded you that even the simplest objects carry great symbolic weight, I invite you to share it. Leave a comment below. I'd love to hear what discoveries you've made in your own space. And if you'd like to receive more content like this, rooted in practical feng shui and ancient wisdom that speaks to your modern life, please subscribe to New Day Mindfulness. Your support helps us reach our next milestone of 2,000 followers, and with it, the ability to create and share even more thoughtful, grounded guidance with you. Until next time, may your home support your journey, and may each step you take toward balance bring you closer to peace, prosperity, and purpose.